What's up, Wizards? It's Dev. Mtg. We like it magic. We got a bunch of Throne of Eldraine spoilers. If you're following along, there's almost like 30 today. There are a lot of cards to talk about, and like half of those have a real shot at impacting one format or another. So there's some really relevant stuff. I want to go ahead and get into it after you like and subscribe. So pause the video. Do that. Okay, we're good. Let's go ahead. Let's jump in. There's a lot of stuff. You know, there were so many cards today that at first I was thinking about doing like a best cards of the day kind of thing, but nah, we go all the way on this channel. I want to cover every card that got spoiled today, and that does mean covering some less than stellar stuff, but this set is so full of flavor that you don't even want to skip cards that are kind of bad, like Enchanted Carriage and the reprint of Return to Nature. I just wanted to show these two cards together because the art tells a story, but honestly, I'm not like super enthused about either of these cards actually existing in terms of their function. I guess Carriage is at least okay in Sealed because 5-mana 4/4s are alright, and this puts a couple of other creatures out to crew it that you can do other stuff with besides just crew it, so it's not really a terrible card in Sealed, but this is more about flavor than it is about function for me. This card just looks awesome. And we got to see a few other cards along those lines today that aren't super powerful, but I just love how they taste. You know, there's Blow Your House Down and Wicked Guardian. These are both awesome. Like, Blow Your House Down is especially funny to me. I love the trend in this set of taking established fairy tale tropes and stuff we've all heard before and just asking, like, what would that effect look like on a Magic card? So Blow Your House Down, obviously 3 creatures can't block this turn. They don't have to be little pigs, but that's the flavor of it, and it's just like, just voila, it's so good. I love the way that some of these cards are designed. Like Wicked Guardian will deal damage to a creature that you control, but you get to draw a card. Again, just like bang on in terms of flavor, and I love the way these cards are designed, but neither one of these look particularly good. I just think they're worth calling out. We also got to see Joust and Jousting Dummy. Joust is a 2-mana fight effect in red that gets a lot better as long as you have a knight. The sorcery speed kind of hurts on this. I mean, it's like a red Prey Upon that, again, it kind of works for that extra mana because if you're playing knights, it becomes a much better card, but I don't think it's a great card in and of itself. That said, in Sealed, this is very playable removal, and Jousting Dummy is 2 mana for a 2/1 artifact creature, so basically any deck in Sealed can play this card, so it's at least decent as far as curve fillers go, and it's got a nice little pump effect if you have the mana to pour into it. So again, these cards won't change the world, but I like the flavor on them too. It's also interesting that it took like 26 years to get a card that's just called Joust. You know, like we've had knights and this sort of Arthurian backdrop for a lot of sets, especially in the early days of Magic, and we just never had like, oh yeah, just Joust. So this is what a Joust is. The Joust is commencing. And speaking of knights, there's also Brimstone Trebuchet, and speaking of just like medium limited cards, there's also Burning Yard Trainer. It does have really desirable abilities and a nice ETB trigger for those aggressive decks, so not bad. And then Trebuchet is a nice way to continually deal damage to your opponent in your aggressive sealed deck, and that's going to be important. Now, there's really not much else today that I think is medium or low impact, but there are a few more things I want to go through today, but these are just slightly, like, one tier up from the stuff I've already talked about. Like, Carval Handy Ranger, I think is how you're supposed to say this, but this is a rough translation. It probably isn't named that at all, but anyway, the adventure half of this is called Bring Back. Now, the creature half is 4 mana, just Selesnya hybrid colors, and it has tap to have creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and it's a 2/2. That's not too bad at all, but you can also just cast Bring Back, and Bring Back actually has the exact same mana cost to just create 2 1/1 white human tokens, like a Raise the Alarm, and then you can get the creature later and tap this thing to make the creatures that you created bigger. So it's actually really, really neat. It's like 3 bodies in Sealed. So again, in the Sealed environment specifically, and just draft, limited at large, I think this is a really desirable card if you're specifically in green and white. But there are 3 of these like sort of random commons and uncommons that got spoiled today that again don't look super high impact, that nonetheless I think might have like a real shot at impacting standard at some level or another, and those are Turn Into a Pumpkin, probably the most ludicrous card name of the day, and that's saying something in a set like this, along with Fairy Godmother, that's kind of cool, and also Wildwood Tracker. I think all 3 of these have at least some ghost of a chance. Turn Into a Pumpkin, again, like really silly card name, but 4 mana for an instant that returns a non-land. I don't even know what that noise was, by the way, guys. But anyway, scary, spooky. But anyway, it returns a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and then you draw a card. and it has Adamant. I haven't actually covered this ability yet on the channel, this mechanic, but if at least 3 blue mana was spent to cast this spell, you also create a food token along with these other effects. And that's actually really good at instant speed for 4 mana, and if you don't necessarily need the Adamant trigger or the Adamant bonus on it, then just 3 and a blue is like really easy to cast for just about any deck. So we've already seen how good Blink of an Eye is when you cast it for 4 mana. This, you don't have the option to cast for 2 mana like Blink of an Eye, and I think that probably does make it worse, but at the same time, if you have the 4 mana, it's just better than Blink of an Eye. The ability to return a non-land permanent actually gives you a ton of play on this card, and I could actually see it sneaking into some decks as like a one-of here and there. I just really like this effect, and at this mana cost, it's actually not that bad. Now, as far as these 2 1-drops, Wildwood Tracker actually looks okay in like mono-green Stompy decks. This is effectively a 2-power creature that you can play on turn 1, and if you're playing like, if you're looking for 1-drops for the Stompy deck, it's like Pelt Collector and this, and that's about all we have right now. But these, 2-power 1-drops are always important for Stompy decks, so if Stompy wants to exist at all, this is going to be an important card for it, so I at least wanted to point it out. But I like Fairy Godmother too. This is just a 1-mana 1/1 flyer for white, but the Adventure Haft is Gift of the Fae, 2 mana, to have a creature get +2/+1 and gain flying until end of turn. Now, the gain flying is really important, especially in limited, but I actually just expect this is going to replace 1-drops like Rustwing Falcon or Siren Stormtamer, but namely Rustwing Falcon in blue-white flyers. That deck needs to get a 1-drop or 2 here and there to replace some of the ones that it's losing, and this is a really good way to replace Falcon. The extra point of toughness on Falcon, not that big of a deal when we're going into a format that doesn't have Goblin Chain Whirler in it anymore, so I'm just not that worried about losing a point of toughness. And the ability to boost a creature on occasion and still get to play this creature is actually really, really good. Again, I ignore the gain flying half on it when it comes to standard play because all the creatures in that deck have flying anyway, but just being able to get a creature through for more combat damage, yeah, this is a sorcery. It could have been great if it were an instant, but I still think that looking at some of the options that we have, especially post-rotation for, white or blue 1-drops in that blue-white flyers deck, this is towards the top of the list. It's a very playable card there. But pretty much everything else today is a rare or mythic, save for a card or 2 here and there. But I want to start with the newest card that we've seen spoiled so far. This actually got spoiled right before I came on camera. And it's a piece of art that we've seen for a while, and we've really been waiting with bated breath to see what this card actually ends up being. So we finally got to see it tonight. Here's Emery, Lurker of the Loch. See, instead of Lady of the Lake, Lurker of the Light. You see what they did there? It's 2 and a blue for a legendary Merfolk Wizard. It's a 1/2. And this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact that you control. And when it ETBs, you put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. You can also tap it and choose an artifact card in your graveyard. You can just cast it this turn. Weeps in Mox Amber, right? Like, it sucks to lose a card that would have been so good with Mox Amber right as Amber's gone. But I guess it would be good in the historic format on Arena, I guess, alongside Amber. So there's at least that, but still, I don't think that mysterious ladies lurking in ponds are good, whatever the rest of that Monty Python line is. It's officially been too long since I've seen Holy Grail. If I were 15, I could have nailed that, but anyway, all of that aside, I do think we've seen kind of a glut of mono blue artifact commanders over the years, and this is what, the 17,000th at this point, and it's definitely not the best, but I guess if you want to build brawl artifacts, this is your chance. This is it, my guy. So I guess it's good for that. I really hate like the insult of losing Mox Amber. At the same time we get this card is like probably affecting my analysis of it, but there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. And yeah, you really want to be playing artifacts, but at the same time this could kind of work in like a reanimator strategy, I guess Wall of Lost Thoughts is probably better if you're trying to do that to yourself, but this could be, copies 5 through 8 of Wall of Lost Thoughts, and gosh, I guess when your analysis of a card is, it's copies 5 through 8 of Wall of Lost Thoughts, like, how good can that be, really? But, like, Blood for Bones decks and other decks that want to put cards in their graveyard, the blue-black deck with Narcomoebas and Creeping Chills, hello, Ziggy. And this card actually looks like it could serve, a function in that list as well, so I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. I do hate that it dies to, like, Shock and Disfigure, whatever, but as far as, like, Brawl commanders go, they probably hit the nail on the head if you want to play artifacts and such, but aside from that, I'm not seeing it with what's in the format right now. Now here's one of those random uncommons or commons from the day that I was talking about, but this one I actually think is very good. This is Return from Clouds. It's 4 mana, 3 and a green for an instant. Put target card from your graveyard into your hand. Then put another target card from your graveyard on top of your library and exile Return from Clouds. But it has Adamant. If at least 3 green mana was used to cast this spell, you put those cards into your hand instead, and then you exile Return. Now, the fact that this is instant speed makes it more than worth a look in my eyes, especially in like very specific control decks, Bant, Sultai, especially decks that play Tamiyo. Because Tamiyo puts cards in your graveyard to kind of fuel this, I guess. You know, if you missed out on drawing them the first time, then it's pretty easy to just cast this and get stuff that Tamiyo put in your graveyard back into your hand. And in the late game, which again shouldn't be too hard for Bant and Sultai, especially Sultai, really grindy, long game decks that do stuff really, really late to just finish things off and fight Wards of Attrition up to then. Well, it should be really easy for them to get 3 green mana and get the extra effect off of this. Nissa decks, it should be really easy to play 3 green mana because each forest produces 2 already, so it's not going to be too tough to get to 3 green mana and get the extra effect off of this. And at that point at instant speed, you're getting the 2 best cards out of your graveyard and you're gaining card advantage at the same time. So card just looks bonkers to me. It's an uncommon to keep your eye on. Let's keep moving up the totem pole. Here's Doom Foretold. This is a really interesting card right here, and it's got like Damnation going on in the background, or maybe it's Merciless Eviction. Not too sure, but anyway, it's 4 mana, 2, a white, and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-land, non-token permanent. If that player can't, they discard a card, they lose 2 life, you draw a card, you gain 2 life, and you create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance, and then you sacrifice Doom Foretold. Now, I've seen a few people confused about the wording on this. Note that, like, a player can't just choose to not sacrifice a thing. They have to sacrifice a thing. And when it comes around to you, you always have the option of sacrificing this if you want to. Now, also note that's a double-edged sword. If this is the only thing you have to sacrifice, you must sacrifice it. So do keep that in mind. There's a couple of pros and cons to it, but at the very least, really interesting card that I'm not really sure, like, where it goes. It might just be like really good in limited or something, but at the same time I'm not even sure this is as good in Commander as it might look. But at the same time, you're wiping permanents off of everyone's side of the table every single turn, and that's probably at least annoying, let me put it that way. Now, I guess one of the only mythics that we saw today was Embercleave. This is a 6 mana legendary equipment, 4 and 2 red. It does have flash, though. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature that you control. And when it ETBs, you attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample. And once you've equipped it to the first guy, you can then equip it to other creatures for 3 mana. I think this is really good. Now, when I first read this, I was like, yeah, whatever. But I guess if you have 3 attacking guys that only cost 3 mana for your Temur Battle Rage, or you're basically an Unchained Fury at that point, that sticks to the creature for the rest of the game and also grants trample, that's very good. That's a really nice little trick and could actually play very nicely in both aggro mirrors and against just about anything. You know, if your opponent decides to Tyrant Scorn this guy, or, Lava Coil that guy or something during your combat step, well, just cast this on the one dude that is gonna get through, guaranteed, and you can actually still cast it in response to the removal spell, so it counts all the creatures you still have on the table. So really, there's some good stuff going on with this, and if you can get it down to just 2 mana, it is definitely a steal to just have this out. And even if they kill the creature Embercleave is equipped to it, it's only $3, $3 mana to equip it to something else, so it just sticks around like Rancor style, and double strike is nothing to be trifled with. So the more I look at this card, the better I think it is. Well, let's move on to Wicked Wolf right here. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 3/3 wolf, and when it ETBs, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. And you can also sacrifice a food to put a +1/+1 counter on the wolf, and it gains indestructible until end of turn, but you also got to tap it. Well, if this thing was a little bit bigger, it probably wouldn't be so bad. You see what I did there? I'm very good at words. But anyway, I think this needs at least either an extra point of PT or 1 less in the converted mana cost department to be like truly good. It would probably be busted if it was 1 less for this, but I don't think like too broken for standard or anything. I do think that green decks need more and more of these fight effects, and note that we've seen them. This isn't the first thing that we've seen in just this set, or recently for that matter, like Voracious Hydra. It really ups this fight mechanic in green, so I like seeing more of that. It's like effectively having removal in green, but the stats are relatively low at the beginning of things here, so I'm not too sure about it. Although I will say, you can have it come into play, have it fight something, and then immediately like sacrifice a food, so it gets +1/+1 gains indestructible. Yeah, you got to tap it, but you weren't going to attack with it that turn anyway, so it doesn't seem like too much of a sacrifice. I guess it can't block on your opponent's turn, but whatever, you kill one of their guys. So really actually kind of like this in decks with a copious amount of food tokens. This actually seems like it could get pretty big and be really annoying very fast. So I think that there are some legs on this, but I don't like that it has the same mana cost as some other really desirable creatures right now. You know, Shifting Ceratops. We're going to see another green 4-drop in this video that's probably just way better than this. There's Nightpack Ambusher, even like Nullhide Ferox. So the 4-drop slot in green is really crowded right now, and I don't think this is the cream of the crop. Although we did get another one for the Wolves deck. We're getting there, kids. But anyway, here's Questing Beast. This is the other green 4-drop I was talking about, and it's the only other mythic on the day from what I understand. We'll run into another one, I'm sure. I have to be wrong. But anyway, it's 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 4/4 legendary beast. Sucks that it's legendary, but check out this text box. Vigilance, Death Touch, Haste. Those are 3 good abilities. And it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. They haven't keyworded this ability yet, but they will at some point, so we'll call it 4 keywords. And combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. Get out of here, fog effects. And whenever Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. There's a lot of ands when you're reading this text box, you know, it's like this ability and that ability and that ability and that ability. Oh, and also this. And by the way, also there's this. So there's just so much text. There's so much text on this card that I think it's probably worth main decking is like the best 4-drop in green right now. And then stuff like Shifting Ceratops gets appropriately shifted to your sideboard. But at the same time, though, bro, 4 mana for 4/4 isn't actually like the best stats. But that said, you know, effectively 4 keyword abilities, 3 keyword abilities, and another one that matters. And the ability to get through, if it does get through for combat damage. And your opponents aren't going to want to block it. It's got the Death Touch, so even if they block it with something bigger, their bigger guy is going to die. But at that time, at that same time, if they let it through, their Planeswalker is going to die. And they're going to take damage. So there's just a lot of decisions your opponent has to make. And forcing your opponent to make those decisions is actually really good. So I like a lot about this card. Don't like that it's just dead to a Lava Coil or something. Or a million other removal spells. It is not very well protected. And 4-drops often kind of have to have some sort of built-in protection, one way or the other, to really see play. So I'm really ambivalent about this, and I want to believe it's a good card because, again, there's so much relevant text on this stupid thing. And by the way, that ability, that middle ability that hasn't been keyworded yet is actually like a lot better than it looks in a format where like Field of the Dead looks like a decent card, so keep that in mind. There's just a lot of like little touches that I really like about this card. You know, it swings in with Death Touch, but then stays up vigilant to block with Death Touch. That's a really powerful creature. Just its effect on the board is very, very high. So I love stuff like that, but at the same time, I'm not sure that these stats can quite get it there. But up next, let's look at Giant Killer right here. This is just 1 white mana for a 1/2 human peasant. And, you know, the first peasant. We're seeing a lot of first-time creature types in this set. Now, you can pay 1 and a white and tap it to tap a creature. That's actually pretty good. Or you can chop something down. Now, this is the instant half of it, the adventure half. It costs 2 and a white. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. That's right. I think this card is good enough to talk about it in the second half of the video, show my face and all that. I think this card is actually very good. Now, I kind of hate that it's rare. It looks like an uncommon, but it probably has to be rare for sealed because it effectively shuts 2 creatures down for the entirety of the game. And I can't really like sufficiently hammer home how good that is, especially in sealed, but even in standard. You know, like right now, Law Rune Enforcer sees a fair amount of play in these mono white decks. It's in just about every single one at this point. And I mean, I think this is probably better than Law Rune Enforcer. The ability cost, I guess you could call it twice as much, but instead of 1 mana, it costs 2 mana. which I really don't think is that high of a price to pay, especially in aggro decks. And it's going to sometimes chop down bigger creatures that outclass your aggro guys. So as far as aggro 1-drops go, I don't like the power on it, but I like the function on it an awful lot. The card does so much for you. Keeps bigger creatures out of combat, keeps bigger creatures dead. That also is a thing. I mean, the ability to, again, effectively shut down 2 creatures on one card is just very good. Plus, you get a body on the battlefield. The card is fantastic. But speaking of removal, we also saw Witch's Vengeance today. We're getting into the really good stuff if you haven't noticed. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 black for a sorcery. Creatures of the creature type of your choice get -3/-3 until end of turn. Alright, so let's get this out of the way. You name humans in Modern there, just do that. But in Standard, is this better than Cry the Carnarium? That's the actual conversation I want to have about this card, because I'm not totally sure. I mean, I think that against Elementals, this is just the better card because it's going to kill lands that Nissa has animated, and that is super important. Plus, it kills like Omnaths and stuff, so that's also pretty good, or at least dry Omnaths that haven't received any counters yet, so pretty important on that end. And I'm certain that there are a few Standard decks where if you name a creature type, you're probably going to pick up multiple creatures, even if it's not a deck that prioritizes creature types. I'm sure there's many different situations where that could happen. Or maybe if Knights tries to be a real creature type in the upcoming Standard, just name Knights, you're done. So this card just looks unbelievable in that capacity to me. But again, I'm not sure it's better than Cry, especially against, you know, like if the Judith deck or the Cruel Celebrant deck, God forbid, like actually tries to be a real deck in the upcoming format, you would much rather have Cry against those decks so that all the dice triggers don't go off. So it really kind of depends on what happens in the upcoming Standard, but this is definitely a card worth considering. But let's get to the Royal Saiyans right here. This is 1 blue and a red for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker. And you can +1 it to draw a card and then discard a card. You can also +1 it to have target creature get +2/+0 and gain first strike and trample until end of turn. And you can -8 the Saiyans to draw 4 cards. When you do, the Royal Saiyans deal damage to any target equal to the number of cards in your hand. Well, this is cute. Now, looting every turn is really good, like especially as a +1 on a planeswalker that eventually gets to a decent ultimate. Is actually, that's okay, but it really doesn't protect itself. You know, when Oko came out, people said, this doesn't protect himself, but he protects himself better than the Saiyans. You know, at least he can make one of the food tokens into a 3/3 to kind of protect himself, or buff up one of your existing creatures to help protect him. But this has 0 protection whatsoever, so I don't know if I like this as much. Now, getting a 6 loyalty planeswalker on turn 3 is kind of protection in and of itself. I said that about Oko, so I'll say that about this one too. I mean, that's a fairly high loyalty at a relatively early point in the game. So I guess if you want to call that protection, it kind of is, but there's really not much keeping this thing from getting run over. Now, I will say the second ability, which, is, by the way, is another plus ability, that's worth pointing out, is probably better than people are giving it credit for. I see a lot of people in their analysis just kind of skipping over this ability, but I actually think that these are, first of all, +2/+0 is a decent boost in and of itself, but the first strike is going to be better than you think it is most of the time. First strike is just always a better ability than people give it credit for, and I think it's going to pull its weight on this ability. But aside from that, the ultimate's what everyone's really talking about today. I will for a second go back to the looting ability because it can fuel like reanimator strategies. There are all kinds of stuff you can do with that. Jump starts in the format, so yeah, blah blah blah. It's the ultimate that's really getting all the attention today because people just want to know how much damage can I possibly deal with this thing. Now, it sucks that Reliquary Tower is leaving the format, but note that Finale, the blue Finale, allows you to have no max hand size for the rest of the game. Oh, and by the way, it draws you a bunch of cards at the same time. So maybe in conjunction with the Saiyans, that can deal just a buttload of damage all at one shot. So I think that's probably your best way of just breaking the ultimate on this, but there are a ton of ways because you don't have to just hit them for 20 or anything. You know? There are plenty of ways, like from a full grip, you'll hit them for 11 and that'll usually close the game out in like a blue-red counter burn deck of some kind. So there are a lot of ways to use the card, but all that said, I'm not sure you'll ever really get a chance to use it the way you want to because it's just going to get eaten up, just steamrolled immediately. I really worry about this Planeswalker's ability to protect itself, but there are some very attractive abilities on it too. Now we've got 3 cards left. So what are my top 3 cards of the day? Now I'm going to surprise you with Wishclaw Talisman. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for an artifact, and it enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it. You can pay 1 and tap it and remove a wish counter from the talisman to search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. An opponent then gains control of the talisman. You can only activate this ability during your turn. It's a real monkey's paw situation. Now, first thing I want to point out with this card is the very, very last line of text. I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, you just do this EOT. You cannot activate this only during your turn. You can do it during your end step. You can't do it during your opponent's. So that might dampen your impression of this card a little bit more, but I still think it's a fine card that's probably better than a card like Scheming Symmetry, which I already kind of liked. Yeah, your opponent gets to tutor something up too, but you get to tutor 2 things, and you get the last laugh. So the card kind of breaks its own symmetry, and I will say it has the potential to be really bad when you're behind, because it might not matter what you tutor up. Your opponent just tutors up the thing that kills you. So that's like the #1 fail case on this card, is you do really have to worry about what your opponent tutors up, and I want to kind of state that first and foremost, but basically, there are a million ways, just in Standard, of abusing this card and making sure that your opponent doesn't actually even get their wishes. Now, the easy one is just search up Knight of Autumn or Thrashing Brontodon with this and then break it immediately so your opponent doesn't get to play with it. So that's good, but it's probably not good enough. You can also just use your own 3 mana Teferi to bounce this back to your hand. Look forward to that in Esper Control. That seems fun. And there's even Karn. I think Karn is probably the best thing you can do to just really break this card in Standard right now. Because you go get this out of your sideboard with the Karn, or if it's just sitting on the table when you play your Karn, it really doesn't matter either way. But still, your opponent can't activate it once they get it. Whoops, because you have a Karn in play. So those are just a couple of baseline, easy ways to take advantage of this. But there are a ton more just under the surface in Standard alone to help break this card and make sure your opponent never even really gets to activate it. But do keep in mind that if your opponent does get to activate it, it comes right back to you and you end up with 2 wishes to their 1. So it's just a better card than it looks like. And it might even go really well with the Lady of the Lake that we saw towards the very middle of the video. Remember that? Good times. Now, that card just lets you get it back over and over from your graveyard. So if you're able to, say, activate it and then immediately break it so your opponent doesn't get it, well, the Lady of the Lake can bring it back to your hand, play it again, so you can do that again. So I think that's there. All of that is good stuff, and there's even more ways than that. I just don't have the time to cover it in this video without this video being an hour and a half long. That's really how many different ways there are of breaking this card. Again, just in Standard. But anyway, #2 card on the day, Murderous Rider. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 black for a 2/3 zombie knight, and all the kids are freaking out about it. The creature half has lifelink, and when it dies, you put it on the bottom of its owner's library. The spell half of it is an instant. It's called Swift End, and it's 3 mana as well, same casting cost. Destroy target creature or planeswalker, you lose 2 life. So it's just Hero's Downfall on a stick that pays for its own life loss. That's very good. It turns out, that is quite good, and it works really well with bounce effects. Again, you can use your own Teferi, bounce this back to your hand after you play the creature half, get the removal half. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this, kids. Brick Walls aggro pretty well in the early games. God, so good. I will say I don't love it against aggro. Not every game. Now, you do get to kill one of their guys and then play a lifelink dude on the next turn, and that seems really nice, but at the same time, losing 2 life isn't where you always want to be against aggro. With Vraska's Contempt, it cost a mana more, but at least you got to gain the 2 life, and that meant a great deal in a lot of games against aggro decks. So, at the same time, I'm not saying, though, that losing 2 life makes the card bad. The card is probably going to be one of the best cards in the entire set. I mean, basically a removal spell, Hero's Downfall, that then allows you to get a body, so you're 2 for wanting them. That's very good. It's so very good, and I was already liking Mono Black. I want to do a whole video about why I think Mono Black is the deck in the next format, even with just what we've seen so far. I think Mono Black is very well positioned, but this just adds on to it. The deck needed desirable 3-drops. You can't just play Midnight Reaper, Plaguecrafter, call it a day. This is a great addition to that deck. Obvious 4 of, but it goes in so many other decks too. People have been saying Esper Control all day, and again, I do like this with the 3 mana Teferi to bounce it back to your hand, but at the same time, I think Double Black is going to be a big ask in those Esper decks once we lose the check lands, but still going to probably try for it. Reach for the Stars, am I right? This is both a removal piece and in some ways a win condition in and of itself for control decks. So I like so much about this, and again, I haven't even, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many good things about this card, but just in sort of a basic way, 2-for-1s are good, and removal that also puts a body on your side of the table is also really good, especially in a format that shrinking in one of the 5 sets that's going to be in this format is a set entirely based around planeswalkers. So this kind of planeswalker removal is just really needed right now. It was just, good lord, this is easily one of the best cards in the day, and again, I'll say it, I'll hammer it home, one of the best cards in the whole set. I'm pretty darn sure of it. So that was a lot of praise, and it was only my number 2 of the day. So what's my favorite card of the day, the one that's going to bend Standard and Modern Magic to its knees? That's Once Upon a Time. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an instant. If Once Upon a Time is the first spell you've cast this game, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Whew! And you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Free spells are too good and shouldn't be printed in newer formats. I thought we've been through this, but they keep doing it. And this one actually looks like, not broken. It doesn't look broken because the effect isn't incredible or anything, but it looks really good. It looks so good, almost too good for me to actually put into words, and that's kind of my entire job, is to put into words exactly how amazing cards like this are. And at this point, I think I'm actually more or less at a loss for how good I think this card actually is. Now, I do want to clear up at least one popular misconception I've seen on the Reddit today, people talking about this card, is that if you have multiple copies in your opening hand, you can't cast all of them for free. It says if it's the first spell you cast this game. So once you cast the first one, you can't cast any more for free. So keep that in mind. You might not actually want to run 4, but you probably do. You probably do, because this effect actually isn't too bad to top deck. In the late game, it's at least instant speed. A 5-card dig is a lot, and you're almost certainly going to get something. Even if you don't hit a creature, you're going to hit a land in that 5 if you didn't hit a creature. So you're going to hit something, and you're going to be holding up in control decks anyway to counter a spell or cast a Nightpack Ambusher, or in Simic Flash, for instance, you're going to be holding up for Primeborn Cutthroat, whatever. So this card just slots in perfectly into those Simic Flash decks and those Bant control decks and such. Even the Sultai decks this goes into very, very well. And just fixes hands nicely. We just got the London Mulligan rule, and now we've got this to fix our opening hands even more in the standard format. That's just absolutely insane. And yeah, I think this works in Modern as well, where this is going to shore up, again, a lot of opening hands. This might even be Legacy playable. I really think the card's that good. Free spells are just insane, and this isn't even a sideboard, a Leyline is a sideboard card. This just goes in the main deck, and whoops, I just get a free spell at the beginning of the game, and it's a really, really good one too. It helps you keep 1 and 2 land hands a little bit more confidently if this is in your opener. This card is crazy, y'all. This is going to lower land counts in green decks, and just, this is a beautiful card. It's a beautiful, wonderful, amazing card. And I think that I won't call this definitely the best card in the set, because there's still another half of the set to see, obviously. More than half of the set to see, but it's hard to imagine a world where there's that much, there's 3 or 4 more powerful cards than this in this set, and if there are, this is the best set ever printed. So I just think if you're going to buy this set for 1 card, this is probably going to be it more than just about any other card. It's just unbelievable what they did with this thing, and I'm hyping it up even more than a lot of other content creators who have already been hyping it today, because that is seriously how impactful I think this card is. I think it's just shy of too unfair for standard Magic, and maybe even too unfair for Modern Magic. It's just, look at the text. Look, it's free. It's free. And even if it's not free, that's a fine cost for this effect. It's kind of better than Venturous Impulse, better than Commune with Dinosaurs. It just takes the 2 best parts of those cards, slaps them together, and just makes an insane card that occasionally gets cast for free and gives you the advantage in the extremely early game. So yeah, this is way better than any other card that we've talked about today, and it's probably going to be way better than 99% of the cards we talk about for the entire set. Take note. I wonder what Happily Ever After is going to do. It's going to be a card. But anyway, I think that's it for this one. I'm pretty sure I haven't reloaded Mythic Spoiler. Let me do that real quick. Yeah, there's nothing new, at least at this point. So I know this one took a while to get out, but I wanted to make sure they'd spoiled every card on the day. I had a lot to say about a lot of these cards, and I really wanted to gather my thoughts. So I apologize this one came out so late, but hope it was worth it. There's a lot of really crazy stuff in this set, it turns out, so hope this piqued your interest. I've seen some people going around saying, like, yeah, the flavor's good, but the set doesn't look great so far. I'm not that interested. If you weren't, then I hope this caught your attention, because there's just some crazy stuff from today, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna keep seeing crazy stuff. So just keep with us, like, subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications so you know when we put out spoiler vids, and hit up the Patreon if you want to support content like this and pick what decks we do first when we get to Throne of Eldraine Standard. It's just $1 a month to do that. And yeah, check out TCG Player if you want to pre-order any of this stuff. They're a pretty good price guide in case you don't know what any of this stuff is costing, what the barometer of the community is on these prices, and TCG Player is a good place to go. They've got a lot of this stuff priced already, so hit the link in the description if you want to check that out. And I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.